We have to briefly talk about this incident in 1967 where Charlie Finley heard that his players were out of control on a flight home when they actually weren't, but it led to Finley firing manager Alvin Dark and releasing Ken Harrelson. As you know, you were accused, and people still seem to assume that you were the person who told Finley about the alleged incident, and that accusation followed you around and has ever since. As far as I can tell, though, you've never been given the opportunity to truly respond to that, so I'd like to give you that opportunity now.
Well, I don't want to make a whole lot out of it, but I can tell you this. On that airplane that day, the way that happened, a couple or three of the guys were drinking. They used to serve those little miniature bottles of liquor, on the plane. They'd go up and down the aisles giving those things away. I used to give mine away to those guys, so what would I care? But at any rate, sitting right in front of me were Charlie's son, Paul, who was a teenager traveling with the team that time, and there was a lady right next to them, right in front of me, and she called for those guys were making a little noise. They weren't really disrupting very much. They were only 2 or 3 rows behind me to the left. And this lady called the stewardess over, and I heard her tell, get the captain back here. These guys are out of order, or something along those lines, or disruptive or whatever. So that girl started walking back toward the pilot's deck, and Alvin Dark was sitting up on the left-hand side of that airplane, and I went up there. I said, Alvin, you might want to come back here and just make sure if the captain comes out, these guys are not doing all that bad. But this lady, I heard what she said, and so Alvin came back here and talked to him. I don't know, what he said or whatever. But when we got to, I think we were going to Washington D.C. after that, and I got a phone call in my hotel room at night, and Charlie said, I want you down in my hotel room right now. He said, we're having a meeting about this thing on the airplane, and he said, I want you to sit down. I want to hear your version of it because I know that you were sitting close there. And honestly, that's the first that I had heard that Charlie knew about it. I had not even talked to him at all, and but since I had told Alvin that, they figured that I must have told Charlie, and then Charlie reacted. Well, as it came out in future time, none of the writers, I can name you some of the guys, that wrote things accusing me of that. None of them ever interviewed me, asked me anything, did I do it or whatever. And it's just always like you say, it's followed me around. I never made an issue out of it. I was working for the ball club. I wasn't going to try to raise any stink about it or anything like that. But I knew pretty well who did it, who told him, and so that's the way that was left. Well, I can tell you, in between times, I went back to the Oakland Coliseum when they had the memorial service for Charlie after he died, and they asked me to do the ceremonies out on the field before a game. I did them. My family was there with me, my wife and kids, and we were walking out of that ballpark, out of the old Coliseum, towards the parking lot, and I heard these steps running fast behind me, and I turned around and looked, and here came Paul Finley, who at that time was a young adult. And he said, Monty, I've got to talk to you. I said, okay, what's up? He said, this has worn on my mind for years and years. He said, I know you took a lot of heat for telling my dad about what happened on that airplane. He said, I just want to tell you, I told my dad. I knew you didn't do it, but I didn't have the guts to tell my dad. And take the blame for it. I mean, you were being blamed, so I knew Dad was satisfied with that, or he would have done something to change it. But he said, I can't let you get away without knowing that I have told some of the press people. He didn't tell very many of them, but he did tell some of them that he was the one who did that. And so it's something I've had to live with, and I'm not the person. Integrity is a big thing with me, and some of the players knew and suggest and supposed that's who it was, and I heard from a lot of those guys, and the people who write these stories say so and so said this, but that's like some of the things that Kurt Smith wrote in his book, Voices of the Game. He admitted to me, and I want to read you something and further on in this interview, if you have the time, to show you how things work. Some of these guys, they will only quote one or two people or somebody, you know, on the other side. Nobody ever asked me to tell my side of that story. Nobody. And it was even written by Brent Musburger, who was writing for Sports Illustrated in those days, out of his Chicago newspaper office or wherever. And he wrote it, and he took the words of it. We had one of my broadcast partners was Lynn Parrish in those days, who was in with all the players and drinking and all this kind of stuff all the time and fraternizing with them. And he wanted my job real bad, and he was one of the guys that told all the other press people around the country that I did it. And but you know, it's just one of those things that everybody has something coming up in their career that you have to overcome. And I had some awfully good phone calls from a lot of people in the industry that understood my plight and spoke for me. And but at any rate, Charlie's son Paul, who was a teenager, but he came up and told me, with my family standing right there, told me that. And I said, "Have you told any of the press people or anything about that?" And he said, "Yes, I did tell some guy writing the book." He said, "I told him about it, but I don't know. I haven't seen anything about that much anymore." And the big thing is, people listening to this have no idea what I mean in Kansas City in '67 anyway. I don't know why. You know, I hate to see it keep coming up because I've been invited back there this year for their reunion of the Kansas City A's. When they were Kansas City A's, they're going to have a big reunion back there for that. I'll see some of those guys, but some of those guys who were there on that team ended up being some of my best friends.
You mentioned you had something you wanted to read regarding to that. We can do that right now if you'd like to.
Well, you're surely aware of the book Voices of the Game, written by Kurt Smith. It's
yes.
One of the best books ever written about broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote some things in that book about me being dull, about being a Christian guy who took it out on other people because they drank and stuff like that, and I didn't associate with the players, and the players and he said, talked about fans thinking how dull I was, and wrote some pretty nasty things about me. And he quoted some guys, you know, that two or three guys from San Francisco Chronicle or somewhere had one or two letters from fans, and he quoted a couple of the letters from fans saying something about I'd disrupted the fresh air of the Bay Area with my broadcast or something like that. And there's one of the most respected writers in the history of sports writing, and he never called me and got anything quote from me. He got quotes from Harry Carey, got quotes from Jim Woods said some good things, and Jim Woods, when he asked him about, working with me and about my being Finley's shill and all this kind of thing, and Charlie insisting that we all these broadcasters be homers for the A's and shields for Charlie. And Jim Wood, he told Kurt Smith, who did put it in the book, said it couldn't have been Monte Moore. He never was with the players at night, which I was, some of them for dinner and stuff like that. But I never went out and partied with them or anything like that. But Jim said he couldn't have been the one telling all that stuff, so he didn't know it. Well, my reaction to what people say about telling Finley things is what would people be afraid of that I would tell? I mean, what did they do or what would I want to tell Charlie that that they did? What was wrong? I don't know what they were thinking about. That kind of thing. As far as being homers, I'd like to see somebody tell me exactly what they think a homer is on a broadcast. But at any rate, some of these bad things were said. And Kurt Smith called me one day, and he said, "Monty, my book is out." He said, "I have heard from some of the best broadcasters in the game, and he said they have told me that some things I said about you were absolutely not true." And he said, "I feel lousy about it, and I'm sending you a letter, and here's the letter he wrote. Dear Monty, I enjoyed talking with you by phone this morning and hope 1994 smiles upon you and your family. After we spoke, I remembered an insider from the late 40s. Brooklyn Dodgers, Jackie Robinson, was yelling in the Dodger clubhouse about something when a teammate, Pee Wee Reese, I think it was, interrupted him. Robinson, he said, you're not only wrong, you're loud wrong. He says, well, I'm proud of Voices of the Game book, but I was wrong. I was loud wrong about you. I can only offer my apology and intend to make amends in my new book with Macmillan and the revised Voices book several years hence. All the best to you and the A's in the upcoming year. Signed Kurt Smith. So that's the kind of a thing, it gets out in the book, but you don't hear anything. He didn't call me and give me a chance to answer any of those accusations about how dumb I was, and used 2 fan letters, and I could have given him 200 good letters, if he'd asked about it. My opinion is you don't last 30 years broadcasting big league baseball if you're that dull, if you're that dead, and you know that little about the game, as they say, and I did. I only worked for Charlie, like I say, a short time. I was hired by NBC for 5 years, USA for 5 years. Charlie wasn't around then. I was hired by the Haas family, Oakland A's, to come back and do television for 5 years after I'd been retired for 5 or 6 years. So it's a kind of an image that is created by writers who don't, they quote Ron Bergman. Ron Bergman, one guy in the Bay Area, and ask his opinion of what the fans think. And that's one person opinion. They write it in the book as if it's dead facts. So that's the thing I have about press people. Some of them absolutely don't give you, they don't give you a chance. They listen to somebody that they're out drinking with or something and say, oh, that's a fact, let's write that.